Awesome. We are live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our 5th Freedom for Truth conference. Thank you for everyone joining us today. Each and every single one of you are instrumental in this journey, and your participation is essential to each one of us, and we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Second, I have to give a special thank you to our guest speakers, two very powerful and inspiring people, Robert Kennedy Jr. and Catherine Austin Fitz. We are grateful and honored to have you join us today. Thank you. Each of us have been taking part of the biggest fight in history, the fight for freedom. We're watching the children and people suffer in isolation, deprived of connections, love, and being with friends and family while businesses crumble. And many of our loved ones are suffering from depression, anxiety, and feelings of hopelessness, among many other things. Now, if you look back in history, humans, like any other animals, have solely relied on intuition and instinct in order to survive. However, as we've evolved into a highly intelligent and sophisticated species, many of us have lost touch with those exact instincts. Instead, we're putting our faith in technology and the ever-changing opinions of friends and family and what society deems to be normal at this time and other factors. In fact, our era could possibly be the most unstable existence humans have ever known before and are out of touch with our intuitions. One thing this great event has created was a mass awakening of mankind. This is the ultimate test of good versus evil, and it's a beautiful thing to see God test us and many of his warriors with their faith and their courage, and to watch us all come together for this great cause of life and liberty. Each person in this fight is instrumental, and through the power of the people will we burst this bubble that they've created. This conference is about taking your power back and bringing our independence and our roots back. This conference isn't about being anti-anything. This conference is about pro-unity and pro-life, bringing the diversity of people together for one common cause, the cause of life and to live. The cause to allow the freedom of choice, the freedom of opinion, the freedom of speech, and the freedom to live, breathe, and do as you choose with your God-given rights and free will. This conference is about bringing together the greatest number of people from all over the country to have their voices not only heard, but to also count. This is the largest organized unity Canada has ever seen, and it's only growing bigger and bigger. We're leveraging the digital world to continuously come together, gathering real data, real information, and real polls and voices to make that change. So once again, from the deepest of our hearts, we thank you all for participating, and thank you again, Robert and Catherine. Now, to start things off, I'm going to hand the mic off to my soul sister, Danielle Pistilli, who's just going to cover some important housekeeping rules before we get the show started.
Thanks, Tanya. And thank you to everyone else for joining us today. And of course, a huge thank you to our special guests. It is truly an honor to have you here with us today. With everything that is happening across our country and around the globe right now, from forced hotel quarantines, enforced mask wearing, the social pressure to take the vaccine, and the latest corruption of allowing our children as young as 12 to make medical choices for themselves regarding the gene therapy injection, I cannot express the importance of this time, this panel, and this Freedom for Truth conference. So with that said, I'd like to start by asking everyone to please like, share, and comment throughout the conference to help bring up the algorithms and get this information out. We were already banned on YouTube. You never know what it's, when the right information is going to come through for somebody and what that particular information is going to be to make a difference and is going to change from the mainstream narrative. Just to make sure that everything runs smoothly here, a few things that we want to highlight. The poll will be posted in the chat several times throughout the call and also will be available on our website at thefreedomorg.ca under the Actions tab for 1 week after the conference. Please remember to participate in the polls and rest assured there is no private information obtained or shared within this poll. We're using this information to counter the mainstream narrative and to get the truth out. That is all. If you have any questions for our guests, please post them in the chat in all capital letters, and we'll do our best to get them answered before the end of the conference. The Q&A will take place after the guests have spoken, so please save your questions until they have finished, and put them into capital letters so they don't get lost in the feed. Donations are always appreciated. You can donate at thefreedomorg.ca via PayPal or by e-transfers, and donations will be going towards a major action campaign to produce billboards and other means of marketing, and especially towards hosting the Love and Light Music Festival being held at Vanier Park in Vancouver on July the 1st for Canada Day. We hope that you'll be joining us, where myself and Alicia will be uniting with Amanda and Tanya for the very first time. So now for the action. Our incredible speakers sharing their fight and light with all of us. Thank you again for coming, everyone. And now I will pass the baton on to my fellow soul sister, Amanda, who will be introducing our first speaker. Miss Amanda, take it away.
Thanks, Danny, for those incredible words and introduction. It is an absolute privilege to work alongside you and join all of these amazing Canadians as we rise to take our country back and empower those that seek out knowledge. Thank you to our speakers for coming and sharing your wise words with all of us, and thank you for joining. Like these ladies said, each voice, each participant counts, and each one of your voices will make an impact. Our first guest tonight really needs no introduction. He is an absolute huge staple in my life personally, a powerhouse of an environmentalist, a humanitarian legend with a heart of pure gold and a soul path that's filled with service to others. Many have tried to vilify him, outshine him, and dim his light, but his heart outshines all of the negativity and darkness through love and action alone. This man unknowingly helped me find my strength, my courage, and my confidence after my youngest fell victim to vaccine injury in 2014. He's one of the top 5 reasons I am where I am today in this fight. And no words spoken could ever express the gratitude I have for this man. He has never faltered in his quest for truth and justice, and for children first and foremost, mothers, families, and the environmental crises around the world. He is the founder of the largest water protection group called the Water Keepers Alliance, as well as the ever-expanding organization Children's Health Defense, a team devoted to the health of people on our planet, with a mission to end the childhood health epidemics by working aggressively to eliminate harmful exposures, hold those responsible accountable, and establish safeguards so none of this ever happens again. Our guest works tirelessly to make this world a better place for all, and has the ability to unite hearts of millions of people through his words alone. Please help me welcome one of my personal heroes, Mr. Robert Kennedy Jr.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm really happy to be here, and happy to particularly be on a podium with Catherine Austin Fitz, who's one of my heroes and somebody I really look to for the best information. And I'm going to talk, I guess, a little bit about Tony Fauci, because he's in the news. And I want people to understand kind of a little bit of the history and where he fits in, and why he has played such a prominent role in all of our lives globally over the past year. And particularly he's in the news now because of the Wuhan lab. And his involvement with the Wuhan lab really began in earnest in 2014. Tony Fauci had been involved in gain-of-function studies since 2002, 2003. He'd been funding them. And he had been criticized from the beginning because people believe that the gain-of-function, of course, gain-of-function is an area of science where you take potentially infectious diseases and enhance them in transmissibility and pathogenicity and virulence so that they become more transmissible to humans and they become more virulent in humans. And there's 2 ways to do that. One is by using CRISPR technology, actually implant genes from, for example, the HIV virus to allow a virus to jump to human beings that is just an animal virus. The other way to do it is through a process called accelerated evolution, where you take the virus from literally the coronaviruses are indigenous to the rectum of bats of these Chinese bat species, horseshoe bats, that come from the southern part of China, from Yunnan province, which is it's a tropical bat. And they take the coronavirus and they usually grow it then on a substrate in a petri dish on bat tissue initially. And then when they get the colony really booming, they transfer those viruses to pangolin tissue or some other animal to which it's easily transmissible. And then from there, they will transmit it they'll grow colonies on the pangolin tissue, and they're now teaching it to jump to other animals, to other species. They teach it usually next to jump to perhaps Cocker Spaniel tissue, and then ultimately to feral monkey kidneys. And when they can transfer it, when they're teaching these viruses to jump to species and now to jump to primates. And after they teach it to jump to primates, they take those colonies and they grow it. They try to grow those colonies on fetal tissue, usually lung tissue from a fetus, from an aborted fetus. And at that point, you've taught it to attach to the ACE2 receptors in the lung, and it's become transmissible to human beings. Then they take that transmissible virus, and we think that the virus that they were using was a virus that infected 6 miners in Yunnan province around 2012. And those miners, 3 of them died. All of them got sick from cleaning up bat guano in a copper mine called the Mojiang mine. And it was an abandoned mine, and they were cleaning it out to restart the mine. 6 of them became very ill with the kind of symptoms that we associate now with coronavirus. But when they went home to their families, they didn't infect anybody in their families. So the presumption was that the virus could make you sick. It could jump to human beings, but only from bats. It couldn't jump from one human to another. And their objective was to teach it to jump from one human to another. And the way they do that is after they teach it to infect human tissue, they put it in with rats that have been altered. They're called humanized rats, and they have human DNA in them. And they try to get those rats to spread it. They'll infect one rat in the colony and try to get him to infect the other rats through coughing or through contact. And once they've done that, they know that they have created a pandemic virus. And they can then experiment with creating vaccines. Now, who would do this? These are very, very sinister experiments. They're called dual use because they're of interest not only to people who want to create vaccines, but they're of interest to military organizations like the Chinese military and the American military because they're potential bioweapons. Tony Fauci began experimenting with these around 2002, 2003, during and after the SARS epidemic. And they were the SARS epidemic had been very, very dangerous, but not very transmissible to human beings. And they were wondering what would happen if we made it even more transmissible. What would happen, if we made something that was as deadly as SARS. SARS was much more deadly than coronavirus. They began doing these experiments in the US. They were doing them at Fort Detrick. They were doing them at the Galveston lab. They were doing them in the Netherlands. And Tony Fauci was paying for all of these studies. And they were doing most of them with a scientist called Ralph Barrick in North Carolina. And in 2014, there were a number of laboratory accidents at those labs where their creations escaped. And luckily, nothing happened. But that caused a furor in the scientific community, and 300 scientists signed a petition to President Obama asking him to stop Tony Fauci from doing these experiments. And one of the things, if you read this petition, which you can find online, it says in the petition that these kind of experiments have been going on for 30 years and that there has been no benefit to humanity from these kind of experiments. Tony Fauci, President Obama, in response to that letter, declared a moratorium, but Tony Fauci violated the moratorium. He closed down about 21 of his studies, but he continued funding and operating secretly the worst of those studies, which were some that Ralph Barrick was doing in North Carolina. He also moved his science offshore to the Wuhan lab. And incidentally, the Wuhan lab was built by a French company.
Is he frozen for everyone, or is it just me?
I think,
Yeah.
no, we're frozen, I think. Bobby's
Oh
frozen.
no, he said
Okay,
the
we'll give
F
it a
word too many times.
Give it a minute.
Jeez. And this is part of what happens, right?
Yes.
Censorship is a real thing, people.
You're not doing it right. You're not doing it right if they're not coming after you
Let's see.
for your voice.
100%.
And if Bobby,
Oh.
if you can hear us, he'll come back in, I'm sure, in just a moment. But just a quick hello to everybody who's on the scene here. We're seeing people all over across Canada tuning in right now. We're seeing all of your messages. Yes, TGI Freedom. We're so happy to be here with you guys. And Bobby should probably be back on in just a moment.
It was getting good.
And it's
It
it's
was.
funny. I keep meaning to say this out loud, but I keep laughing every time I see the live number. Today it says 359, but you guys can guarantee when we look on the back end, there's like quadruple that amount. So it's to show you guys that, oh hey, not a lot of people are hanging out. But in reality, when we look at the analytics, it's huge. So I just want you to keep that in mind. Don't let them play mind games with you. You guys are showing up in full force, and we couldn't be happier.
And keep sharing
Thank you.
Too, right?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Keep sharing and liking. That's the only way to break algorithms, especially on, as we like to call it, fascist book now.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yep.
We just had our YouTube channel taken down last week as well. So that was a bonus.
Well, I'm sure my YouTube channel will be taken down after this too. I've had a few hits.
No doubt.
Few hits.
Yeah.
No doubt. Well, and Catherine, we're thrilled that you're joining us as well today. And
Oh, it's my pleasure.
It's just exciting to have you here. I know everybody's been really looking forward to having you both here, and I've described you as being, you know, if you really want to know what's going on behind the scenes, you're the one person that can tell us all about the financial system and you know what's going on behind the scenes and what this is all really about. It's like you've got all of that easily laid out for people. I just love the video that you did late last year.
Lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I have to tell you, I did an interview with James Lyons Weiler, and I don't know if you know, he's the scientist who worked on the Paul Thomas study.
Yeah, he's
Are you all
amazing.
familiar with the Paul Thomas study?
I can't say I am. Please fill me in.
So Paul Thomas is a pediatrician in Oregon who had supported his patients in not doing the heavy vaccination schedule. And after many years, he had in his practice, a practice with a large pool of unvaccinated, a large pool of lightly vaccinated, and then a pool of heavily vaccinated. And he brought James's Institute in, and they did a study to produce what was the difference in terms of health, illness, number of visits to their pediatrician between the three groups. And then what was the difference to the economics of the doctor? How much more did the doctor make by vaccinating? How much revenue did Paul Thomas give up by agreeing to help people not vaccinate? And it's an absolutely fascinating study. And of course, as soon as they came out with it, the Oregon License Board went after Dr. Thomas. Anyway,
Yeah.
but I had him on, and we've had different subscribers who've been struggling with their families. So we created something called the Family Financial Disclosure Form to help members of the family persuade and educate other members of the family. And you can find it up on Solari. Anyway, but so we've had different subscribers struggling to persuade other members in their family not to take the injection. And so we got James on, and he talked science and I talked money, and it was just science, money, science, money, science, money. And a subscriber called me and said, "Oh my God, my mother has seen the light and has, said, I'm not touching this stuff. I won't take it." And I said to her, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, I listened to the interview with Dr. Lyons Wheeler, and they talked enough money and science together that it was like a break." In other words, she needed to hear all the different pieces together, which is hard because the science is so complicated. I mean, just listening to Robert Kennedy Jr. on the science, because he's a master of the science. He really digs in and understands it.
Yes.
You can see how complicated it is. Anyway, but, to get that breakthrough requires this all, one of my favorite quotes is, "Nobody is as smart as all of us."
Yes.
And that's why you guys pulling together from, all the different areas of Canada and sharing our knowledge, that we're able to figure out the whole thing together and then what we do. So
I always say that the power of the people are stronger than the people in power. It's true.
Yeah.
absolutely. My favorite, I can go into this after Bobby comes back, because he'll be back. But one of my favorite sources of information in the last 20 years is John Rappaport's interviews. And he has an interview. What he does is he gives people anonymity, and people who worked inside the establishment, and then they tell all. And they're fabulous for understanding the nuts and bolts of control and how it's engineered. But he has this one series of interviews with a guy whose pseudonym gives him a pseudonym of Ellis Medavoy. Have you ever heard of the Ellis Medavoy interviews?
No.
No.
Okay. So Ellis Medavoy was a PR guy, and his job was to craft and market the lies, but the really big lies, like there's a pandemic, those kind of lies. And my guess is he probably, from reading the interviews, my guess is he probably worked for somebody like the Executive Council of the Foreign Council on Foreign Relations. And anyway, so he does this series of interviews with John, and he's talking about how they manage and manipulate it and what their process is and sort of the keys of making a big lie and making it go. And finally, in the second or third interview, John blows up and he says, "Well, if you guys are so smart," but at this point, Ellis is retired, which is why he's giving these interviews. And John said, if you guys are so smart at crafting these lies and we're so stupid that we believe them, why are you even talking to me? And then Ellis kind of breaks down and says, it was so strange because every time we thought we just had it totally controlled and nailed down, this thing would happen and it would go out of control. And what he was talking about was the divine intelligence. And they couldn't quite get it. And that's one of my concerns about the injections is they're part of putting in a control system that allows or makes it much easier for humans to resonate with a machine instead of with a divine intelligence.
Transhumanism.
So, yeah. So,
well, they're trying to change us from our creator, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just changes from our creator, but change our, right now, if you study how we work sort of our electromagnetic presence and intelligence, we resonate with life. We resonate with each other. We receive intelligence from, one of my favorite preachers says, the wisdom is woven into the fabric of the universe. They don't want us to resonate with the wisdom in the universe. They want us to resonate with our smartphone. And, so this really is the machine versus life.
Yeah.
They put us in what's called the 5 sense bubble.
The 5.
Within your 5 senses. You only think that whatever you can
Right.
see, feel, and hear is the only thing that exists in the
Right.
universe.
Right. It's hyper materialism.
Exactly.
Right. So
I don't know if we should move on and then possibly just give Bobby the platform when he comes back, because I think you've got a lot of great information to share, Catherine.
Oh, yeah.
well, I'm happy to. Why don't we just do Q&A, because I think he's going to come back, and I think we really want to hear. If you look at the research that he's done on Fauci, it's absolutely incredible. It's incredible. He gave a presentation about 6 weeks ago at a church. He was at Judy Mikovitz's church, and he gave a presentation on Fauci, and I thought I'd read and studied a lot of, how much evil Fauci has done in his life. I was blown away. I had no idea, and it's an excellent case study in what is wrong with Washington and the world. And so this is very important information. So what I was wondering is maybe we could do Q&A until he comes back.
Absolutely. But I think, you know what? We should properly introduce you to everybody.
Introduce you.
Alicia, take it away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a member of your fan club. That's who I am.
Oh,
we love you, Catherine.
We're a fan of yours.
Yeah, you have
The
no
tapeworm.
idea.
So my nickname for the people around the world is Mr. Global. And the thing that scares them the most are mothers. Mothers are dangerous. Have you ever seen the movie The Forgotten with Julianne Moore? It's a science fiction movie, but it's about how you cannot stop a mother. Mother's love for a child is the most powerful political force in the universe. And, they've never been able to win on homeschooling. It's the same with the injection fight. And you're
like
the
mother bear.
Yeah. So to see this group of, powerful mothers come together is great. So I predict good things for Canada.
For being here, Catherine.
Yes.
Yeah, we absolutely appreciate you. You have no idea. So let's, for those who haven't been introduced to the amazing Catherine Austin Fitts, we'll give you a little bit of a background. So she is an absolute powerhouse. She is an investment banker, former public official, and the former United States Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development during the George W. Bush presidency. She has widely written and commented on the subject of public spending and has spoken out regarding several large-scale instances of government fraud. She has researched and commented on government spending in a 2004 study published in World Affairs, the Journal of International Issues, where she found evidence that a very large proportion of the nation's wealth was being illegally diverted for several decades into secret, unaccountable channels and programs with unspecific purposes, including covert operations and subversions abroad, with public institutions being infiltrated and taken over by shadow groups in the service of powerful private and vested interests. Now, she, along with many international heroes and humanitarians fighting for humanity, are working together to expose the pandemic as a cover-up for a coup d'etat aimed at taking over the planet, converting democratic process to technocracy, imposing complete economic and political control over human beings across the globe. You can find her documentary, Planet Lockdown, circulating all over social media platforms around the world, and The Solari Report at www.solari.com. And I myself was fortunate to discover her last year in an interview where she was exposing the fraud behind this pandemic. And it just so happens we share the same birthday.
Really?
So, yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Isn't
it great? It's like me and Jesus. I love it.
Christmas Eve, right? Christmas Eve. Yeah. So when I found that out, I was like, oh my goodness. So I feel very, very honored to share a birthday with you.
So we should probably tell the audience we were born on December 24th.
Yeah.
And we never have to take a test, right? You never had to take an exam or a test on your birthday, right? Nope. And they're always great sales, so you can go shopping, right?
Yep, that's right.
And everybody's celebrating and in a good mood. They're available for parties.
Absolutely. It's always a party at that time. Yep. Right. Yep. No question there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So shall we see what questions in the chat
Yeah.
group for Catherine? So let's have a look here. Okay, so someone is saying, what do you suggest we do to protect our cash and crypto?
Okay, so the thing to remember about financial issues is everybody's different. I used to be an investment advisor, and what I discovered working as an investment advisor for individuals and families is each circumstance is unique, and I would find myself in the same way giving wildly different advice to different people. So I just say that because you really have to be careful. But let me give you some principles about how to function in this environment. Once upon a time, we used to do everything ourselves. So we were on the family farm, and we made most things or traded with our neighbors, and we were highly resilient. And we've gone to a model where our entire financial statement, our income, our balance sheet has been disintermediated. So we basically go work at the company, and then we take money and we buy everything at the company store, and then we put our money in our retirement plan and invest in the company. And so a lot, if you go through your life, a lot of the things you depend on large institutions or large governments. So much more of our money has been centralized. And the most important thing, and it's different for every person, anything you can do to sort of get the large guys out of your pocketbook is going to build your resiliency. If you come into Solari, we have an article called Coming Clean, and it walks you through the different steps. And I wrote it, I started this, I was sitting in Washington and I was battling with the Department of Justice over the mortgage fraud that was clearly being done by the New York Fed member banks. And I was writing a check on sort of the private wealth group at one of the big New York Fed member banks. And I froze and I realized, why am I banking at the guys who are doing this? And then I said, oh, I've got to come clean. I've got to get these guys out of my life and my wallet. So the first thing you need to do is say, how can I build much more resiliency? One of the big financial problems we all face is inflation. And the more I can do it for myself, the more protected I am from inflation. So let me give you an example. I used to have a client who was constantly complaining about her water bill. And she was also complaining that the yields on her stocks were going down. And she lived in a rural area. I said, this is simple. Sell some stocks, build a well, and provide your own water. And so you don't need to pay the water company to provide your water if you're doing it yourself. That's an example of disintermediating the companies out of your balance sheet. So go through your life and start thinking about, how can I do much more for myself or much more with other people? So another example, I had a friend of a client who was very nervous about the financial markets and the growing fraud. And so he had 5 kids and they all had mortgages. And I said to him, look, this is simple. Your kids are paying, they're paying interest to the big financial institutions. Why don't you just refinance them out of their mortgages? Someday they'll inherit the money anyway, and then they all pay you. Instead of paying the bank, they pay you, and that's how you'll get a steady yield and steady income. You'll bring their interest rate down, but it'll dramatically improve the yields you're getting. And so he did. And it was funny. I saw him a couple years later, and I said, how you doing? He said, well, I missed the rise in the stock market, but I sleep like a baby every night. he's got 5 kids sending him 5 checks every month. So the one thing I would stress more than any, one of the largest risks we all have, in addition to financial inflation, is not just inflation in the price of food, but deterioration in the quality of food. So I think, and this is true everywhere in the world, it's true for Canada, even though Canada is a food juggernaut, you need to sit down and say, okay, who's your farmer? Who's your rancher? Where's your food going to come from? Because there is a concerted effort, both with the purchase and ownership of farmland, food, all the different parts of the food system. There is an effort to really concentrate ownership control of the food system in a way that I think is going to have dramatic, just like the pharma guys want to do injections, they want to do synthetic food. So the only way we're going to have fresh, nutritious, healthy food is if we buy local, finance local, and really make an effort to shift our money. Think of it this way. We have to finance the world we want to live in. We're not going to be able to make a tremendous amount of money over here and then go over to a different space and live in the world we want to live in. We've got to finance the world we want to live in if it's going to be there. And that's really true for food. So everybody listening to this, I would really sit down and think very creatively about how you can start to organize to dramatically improve the quality of your food locally and the resiliency of your sources. So think of local food as a real investment opportunity. One of the reasons when I finished the litigation that I did with the federal government, I bought a small home in a farming community, and I bought it because I expected that we would go through this sort of explosive quantitative easing and inflation would be a real problem. And I specifically designed it so that if inflation really hit my food budget, hit my property taxes, everything else, I'd be able to handle it, in pretty much almost any circumstance. So that's part of living low to the ground. Anytime you can make an investment that will permanently reduce your expense structure, you absolutely want to do it. I'm constantly telling I spend a lot of time talking with people about the curriculum that they use for their kids. And I keep telling anybody, if you look at the complexity and the fraud in the real estate and mortgage and construction business, if you have a teenager, for God's sakes, teach them how to build their own home. It is literally easier for a young person to learn how to, at this point, build a home and do all the aspects of building and maintaining a home than going to work for a large corporation, getting the money, then financing a home with a big mortgage, et cetera, et cetera. So if you look at the treadmill versus doing it yourself, the doing it yourself is making more and more and more sense. And the technology you guys are using to pull together this live stream, that technology can be used to do amazing things in terms of teaching us how to be more resilient. So whether it's building our own home or food, I would say the number one thing you ought to do is build resilience. The number two thing is there is nothing more important than the quality of the people that you do business with or you invest in. So whether it's your bank, whether it's the companies you're investing in, if you're investing in other companies, you want to think of this as a bad guys, good guy thing. You want to put your money with the good guys and you want to get the bad guys out of your life. And it's hard for many people to do because the bad guys have been made so fashionable. We're constantly being pumped with this idea that the bad guys are really, they're cool, they're hip, they're this, they're that. And what we're discovering in this pandemic is, no, this is not so cool. This is not so hip.
Yeah.
I don't want to miss a question that's just come up here, but it says, if you take your money out of the bank, where do you put it? Where is it safe?
So here's why it's so great that you're having Robert Kennedy on here. The way I started to support Children's Health Defense, which I think is an organization that's doing just amazing, amazing work. I can't recommend them to you highly enough. I had, it was right, you remember when the World Economic Forum came out and said, it's 2030, you'll have no assets, but you'll be happy? Mm-hmm. Anybody remember that one?
Yep, sure
do. Right after that, I
I
had a wonderful former client who sold a fairly significant property. And she called me and said, should I roll the money into real estate or precious metals? And I said, what is it you don't understand about it's 2030 and you will have no assets and be happy? They're planning on taking everything. Mm-hmm. That's what this is about. This is about freedom versus slavery, and you're not going to have any assets. So frankly, I wouldn't buy real estate or precious metals. I would finance an army. Mm-hmm. Because the only assets we're going to be able to have are the assets we can protect. So I said, you ought to take that money and start financing litigation of the people who are going to the courts and trying to make sure you live in a world where you can have assets.
Yep.
So the first thing you have to do, if you come into Soleria, it says, who's your farmer? Who's your banker? Who's your sheriff? Where's your money? So I think one thing I would absolutely think about is as this rolls out, who's going to be there to protect, the law applying to you? Who's going to protect you? So some of your money has got to go to litigation. It's got to go to political action. And where this is all going to come down to, we haven't really started to talk about yet, but right now with our taxes, we're financing governments that are using that money in a way that is illegal. And what we're all going to have to face is, if we're going to have taxation without representation, which is where the central bankers want to go, how are we going to use the taxes we pay and the taxation system to move government back to a point where it's obeying the law? Because there is no financial solution to a world where we pay money to criminals who use it to destroy us. That can never work as a model.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Catherine, can you touch a little bit on crypto as well?
Pardon me?
Can you touch a little bit on the crypto as well? Because that's something that I myself have been very reluctant to even get close to. So I think it would be great to share your insight. I think you've kind of indirectly touched base on that a little bit, but it's a very hot topic. So if you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So here's the problem where I said during the financial crisis, Mr. Global does not care if it's called dollar or wampum beads, as long as it's digital. So when you build a digital financial transaction system that can be controlled centrally, you're talking, if you've read the Bible, it's the mark of the beast. Your money can be controlled centrally. So the IMF a couple months ago had a panel with Carstens, who's the head of the Bank of International Settlements, and Jay Powell is the head of the Federal Reserve. And Carstens was pointing out that the beauty of CBDCs, which is they call central bank digital currency, I call it central bank digital control. And he was pointing out the beauty of the CBDCs was that if Powell didn't want somebody transacting in the currency, he could just turn it off centrally. It's kind of very funny because Powell got nervous that this was being, that Carstens was being so bold. But what we're talking about is the end of currency. So if you can put into place a digital currency system or a digital financial transaction system and get rid of cash and get rid of our ability to transact with things like not just the cash systems, but precious metals and coins, what you can do is put into place a complete control system. And you're talking about what I would describe as a return to slavery. So if I can't, once a CBDC system goes into place, I literally, the system will be designed, and this is coming through the vaccine passports is the intention, but this will be designed to literally make it possible for the banking system to stop you from transacting outside of a certain area. So they can say you can't transact outside of 5 miles from your home, or your electric car can't work outside of 5 miles from your home, and you can't transact outside of 5 miles from your home, or you can't transact in certain ways. You can't buy certain kinds of foods, or you can buy, so you can't buy real food. You can only buy synthetic food. So you're talking about a complete control system which can be managed with AI and software, and can make you financially dependent on a system which can then tell you what to do in literally every aspect of your life. Not only can it tell you what to do, but it can do complete surveillance on you because it's seeing and controlling every transaction. Now, what this process of building a digital all digital systems started with prototyping the different cryptocurrencies. And I've always seen Bitcoin or any of the other cryptocurrencies as a way to prototype and develop the system, which ultimately the governments and the central banks will come in and take over. So to me, many people have believed these are very decentralizing. I don't feel that's true at all. If the central system can see all the data and do total surveillance with it, and then basically turn off your ability to turn it, to buy and sell, this is not decentralizing. It doesn't lead to freedom. And what I've said to all the crypto folks is you're simply prototyping the train tracks of control for these guys. Now, when I say that, digital systems like crypto could be a wonderful thing in a world where the governance system is really committed to freedom. So, but right now, you're on a system which is playing to and serving ultimately central control, because the speed at which governments and central banks can take control of all these systems is, they can do it very, very quickly, both with regulation, but they control the infrastructure. They control the hardware, they control the satellites. So, so you just have to remember, when you're dealing with crypto, you're dealing with a very centrally controlled governance structure that can take control whenever they want to, however they want to. And unfortunately, they've used Bitcoin very, very successfully to talk people out of real assets. So you see farmers dying on the vine because everybody's so busy making lots of money in Bitcoin and happy that they're doing it, that they're letting their local food system die because they're not financing it. They're busy making money on crypto. So there's an arbitrage going on between the real world and the real world that we need to have if we want to be healthy and live, and the digital world. And so we've been played on that arbitrage. And while everybody's been buying Bitcoin, the central bankers have been acquiring and getting more gold and keeping retail out of the gold market. And it's not that gold is a magic bullet or fresh food is a magic bullet. But again, I get back, if we're using our money to build the world they want and a world where they have complete control of us, and you're not using your money to build the world that we want to live in, where is that going to go? So I want to tell you one last story that'll give you a sense of why I look at this in a very different way. When I started litigating with the federal government in 1998, they were able to shut off every source of income and credit to me, boom, 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 boom. It's very immersive when they move in one of these enemy of the state hits. And when it happened, one of the things I realized was that I had given or lent to family and friends $250,000. So that my outstanding loans and gifts at that time was $250,000. And they tried to scare my family in dropping their support. And I had a very wonderful uncle who was financially very secure. And he said, she's always banked us and she's always helped us. So I'm not going to throw her overboard. I'm going to stick and I'm going to help and I'm going to support her. And over the next 11 years, people either paid me back or gifted to me $250,000. And it was that money that kept me alive. If I hadn't invested that money in people instead of in the financial system, if I'd put that money wherever I put that money, I would not have made it. I would not be alive today. And it was very interesting when the money came back, when I settled the litigation, we won. It was quite a miracle. I took the money back in and my CPA said, "Oh, we're going to refund your 401k." I said, "Nope, I'm not refunding my 401k. I'm taking that money and I'm sending it back out on the People Bank." And I bonused out large amounts of money to all the people that helped me win, or I gifted or loaned money back. And I said, that's the bank I trust, because this is, as we're in a huge fight. And when it comes down to the moment when the fight is the most tense, we're going to win because we're for each other and we're watching each other's back. So I made a decision. I'm going to invest in people. I'm going to invest in the Solari report, financing and publishing people doing great work. and I'm going to put my money in the people bank, because to me, people are real, and digital money is, to me, it's just it's a paper game. It's a it's a very, very contrived thing. And one of the things we do a lot on the Solera report is warn people about the pump and dump in the Bitcoin and other crypto markets, because there's a lot of funny business going on, and it's getting pumped and dumped. And if you're, one of the dangers, particularly if you're a young person, if you start swapping and creating taxable transactions as you go into the pump, and then it dumps, your tax bill is larger than your total position unless you've taken money out at the top and escrowed. So we have one paper. If you come over to Solera, we have one paper on the taxation. Now it's for U.S. citizens, but I don't think Canada's going to be that different. So I would really recommend, if you're playing around with crypto, you want to really be knowledgeable about the regulations and the taxation, because I really feel as though, I've seen several times the powers that be run entrapments on that community. And it's always heartbreaking to see it when it happens. Mm-hmm. So you're playing in a very tricky game. And I think if you want to do cryptos, and there are many financial logical reasons to do cryptos, just remember you're playing on your enemy's platform, and you want to manage what you're doing as if you're playing in a speculative market. So there are different rules of how you sort of trade a speculation, and how you trade something that can turn against you in terms of taxation and regulation. So you just want to remember you're on a very tricky platform.
Yeah, I just want to bring up, when it comes to Bitcoin, I mean, Elon Musk tanked Bitcoin with one tweet, which, it just shows the volatility of.
Well, if you look at how Bitcoin was running up, yes, the dump started with Musk's tweet, but if you look at the financial engineering behind it, there was a lot more going on to cause the dump. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have to tell you, one of the ways, if you have enough infrastructure, if you're Mr. Global, you have enough infrastructure to engineer pump and dump, it can be fantastically profitable, because remember, you can make money on the up and you can make money on the down, and you can make a lot more money on changes in price than you can in a steady market. So if you're, one of the biggest tensions in the financial system is that the world wants the financial system for trading, and the criminals want the financial system for pumping and dumping. And so the tension around the dollar for decades now has been, we need a currency which is stable and can trade to do business, because we want to export food, or we want to import machines. And, we can't use a financial system that's turned into a casino and a financial war. So there's a real tension between using financial systems to control and to engage in organized crime versus financial systems being used to conduct the business of the world. Mm-hmm. And that's, if you listen to the squabbling at the G20 meetings, that's what they're arguing about. You guys want to pump and dump and play all these games and play economic warfare, and we just want to trade and build civilization. So the civilization builders and maintainers are fighting with the organized crime. And I don't know, has anybody here seen the TV series Yellowstone?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
it's
so I love Yellowstone. So Yellowstone was the movie of the year on the Solera report in 2019. So in January 20, I announced, Yellowstone's the movie of the year. And I said in January 20, when I announced it, that the biggest question before us was, what are we going to do about the Beck brothers? So for the people who haven't seen Yellowstone, the Beck brothers are the two business guys who do everything dirty. They kidnap your grandchild, they poison your cattle herd, they steal, they hire mercenaries who do assassinations. And so in the second season, I hate to give it away, the the good guys have finally decided, okay, there's only one way to deal with the Beck brothers. We're going to have to kill them. And Tony Fauci is definitely a member of the Beck brothers clan. So
to the train station with
right.
to the train station.
So he corners the guy, one of the Beck brothers, in the bathroom before he kills him, and he doesn't want to have to kill him, but he knows he has to. This guy has just kidnapped his son. And he says to him, why do you do this? Why are you forcing us to kill you? And the guy looks at me and says, nobody ever fights back. So I said, the number one question in 2020 is, what are we going to do about the Beck brothers? Because in fact, if you look at how organized crime has grown globally over the last 50 years, it gets worse and we don't fight back, and it gets worse and we don't fight back, and it gets worse. We keep trying to go around it or duck it and find a safe place to put your money. So as an investment advisor, I was always asked, where can I put my money that's safe? Well, if the Beck brothers run the planet, there's no place that's safe, because all financial assets depend on the law. And if there's no law, that's why I told my former client, finance the litigation Children Health Defense is doing, because if there's no law, nothing's going to work, and all your assets have no value.
Catherine, it's funny because, almost one thing that most Canadians can agree on here is our crime minister, Trudeau, who has literally ripped all of us off. And I think that that's one point of agreement that
Absolutely.
we can have, but yet what are any of us doing about it, really? Nobody's pushing back. So until we all start to come together and start saying enough is enough already, it's going to continue to go on. The media just changes the story. We had the We movement, the thing that was happening with Trudeau that he was paying out his family for, and the media changed the narrative, and everybody's kind of forgotten about it.
Well, but here's the thing. There's, you have a system. And what people refer to as the corporate media is not media. Okay. So there's news, there's intelligence, there's entertainment, there's propaganda. And the corporate media is a combination of some news, but mostly propaganda and disinformation. And I think the challenge for many people is to come to the realization that the governments and the media are as captured as they are. So, hopefully the people on this call are getting the news through you guys, as opposed to, just turn all that stuff off. Mm-hmm. If you come to Solari, we have a commentary. If you put it in the search box, children, you'll pull it up in the third or fourth in the search bar. It's called Mind Control Tactics Used on Children and Everyone Else. Yeah. And I put it together originally for a group of grandmothers who were stunned and shocked by what was happening to their grandchildren. They couldn't understand it. And that's because the corporate media and those systems are basically propaganda and mind control. And when I say mind control, I mean electronic technology. Mm-hmm. And this is something I was forced both by the litigation and by investment advisory to kind of dig in and face. And I first started to cover it because I had clients who were absolutely being defrauded using this technology. So you get somebody addicted, you make a pitch to them, and you use entrainment technology on the phone or, through the internet, and you literally mind control them into doing something with their money, which is financially disastrous. Anyway, so I was dealing with that fact pattern, and I started to publish things because you can't protect yourself from a technology unless you know it exists. So, for example, one of the links, it includes a whole series of book reviews. One of the book reviews that I published was called Irreversible Damage. Does anybody know about this book? It's by Abigail Schreier, and it's about the transgender phenomena in young women. Mm. And her first piece of advice is, do not give your child a smartphone. Mm. Now, what I will tell you as a former government official, giving a teenager a smartphone is like giving the Russian mafia a hotline to your child. Eesh. Okay. You're basically putting the most psychopathic people on the planet into direct contact with your child, and they can feed them subliminal messages. They can feed them the most extraordinary information and recruit them in. And if you look at how, I believe that part of the transgender movement is basically creating young people who they can experiment on. So they can experiment on with hormonal stuff, etc. But it's so gruesome and it's so outside the ability of most people to fathom, that they have a hard time understanding that kind of evil would be allowed.
Or they missed it.
Right. When you, because it's invisible. We're talking about invisible technologies. And we're talking about both an invisible spiritual phenomena and an invisible, physical phenomena, both of them. And, but we have to begin to realize that we're up against an infrastructure, a governance infrastructure of people who truly believe that they no longer need us as labor, and they no longer believe that we should be allowed to have any representation in the governance process. So right now, we have a battle going on in Canada, in the United States, within the sort of Western democratic countries. You had a infrastructure where the central bank ran the money, and whether the central bank was owned by the private bankers or the public, behind the scenes, the private bankers are really running it, and they ran monetary policy. And then the electorate voted for representation, and the representatives controlled the budget and the taxation money and the credit. So you've had this balance of power between the electorate and the central bankers. Now what is happening, and what the pandemic is the cover story, or part of the cover story for, is the central bankers want to take over the governments. And we are having a battle, and it's between the population, us, and the central bankers. Who's going to control the government? So is the Canadian government or the American government going to be run by the central bankers who do things that are not what we want, or are we going to take our governments back? So I don't see the governments as the enemy. I see the governments as the football, and our team's got to take the football back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's a question that came through here, Catherine, wanting to know, how do you see a Nuremberg trial in the 2.0 era?
Good question.
I don't see, I believe what's going to happen are, I'm hoping will happen, is a great deal of movement into the courts and into the political arena to really battle out and fight for the rule of law. I don't see a Nuremberg trial happening until the central bankers are basically told no. Mm-hmm. And that can happen in many forms, in many ways. But if we're going to really come out of this with a human civilization, we have to decentralize the creation of money. We don't need central bankers. That's the little joke. We don't need a small group of secret people to create and manage our money. Communities, that can be done bottom up. And that's why many of the crypto people are so enthusiastic about crypto, because they understand the power of sort of decentralization of the money creation system. And so we're going to have to, right now we're in a process, and the central bankers are winning. Because they've got us fighting, fighting away from where the real fight is. So, I don't think they're going to win, but I think I said to somebody today, we're sort of listening to the music in the halftime in the second inning, as the teams switch and the new team goes out on the field. So this is a long distance run, and the central bankers are far from lost. I think we've got to get clear. We've got to get enough of the population, 5-10%, to say, that's it. I'm going to go to the difficulty of literally shifting my money out of building the national security state and into shifting my money into building the kind of world I want to see. And you need a critical mass of people. And if you look at all the things that we can do, you need significant popular support, both for taking back the governments, but also for holding these people accountable. Before you can do a Nuremberg 2.0, you've got to have a cultural shift to shun these people. So one of the most powerful political tactics in the world is shunning. And we have not yet gotten to the point where enough people are willing to say, you know something, these guys are psychopaths. We're going to pull our support. We're going to pull our attention. You know, if we're still watching MSNBC or CNN, we keep supporting these systems.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, you know, just turn them off.
Yeah.
We need to turn them off. We need to walk away. We need to shun them. And that's coming. That's happening. But I think it's happening because many of us are saying, we're realizing, okay, there's no way to wriggle around this individually. We can't let this stand. So I think one of you said in your introduction, we're coming into the end game here. Yeah. So this is freedom or slavery. And at some point you have to pull the plug on the people who are engineering the slavery. Because, you know, I don't think everybody realizes. I was at the Aspen Institute a couple of years ago and having a bit of a disagreement with a billionaire type. And he looked at me and he said, you know, basically, these are sort of my words, look, sweetie, we can do everything with AI and software. We don't need people anymore.
That's a scary word.
I would say this, you know, we don't need central bankers anymore. We can figure out how to build, you know, do our own money. So that's the funny thing. The more these guys consider using technology to centralize control and do it in a way that's out of alignment with life, the more we can say, you know, we don't need you. We don't need to be financially or legally dependent on you. One, you don't believe in the rule of law, but two, you know, we really just don't need you.
So it's and I've been saying this actually for quite some months. I almost feel like technology has brought us to where we are, but it's almost like we have to kind of digress backwards and start being more dependent and on ourselves rather than dependent on, you know, again, our smartphones, our computers, you know, just everything that is convenient. And there's so many people that are so complacent and they just, it's grown a lazy society. Technology has grown a lazy society. And so.
Well, but we're busy, you know, and I like technology. I'm sort of a, you know, I love gadgets. I love machines. I just did a Solari report with Corey Lynn from Corey Diggs. Mm-hmm. And it was called Loosen Technology's Grip on Your Mind. And she published it on her website and it's public. And we literally went through all the different aspects of your life and showed you sort of our ideas on how to get technology in a place where it's working for you instead of sabotaging you. So whether it's the sabotage that comes from surveillance or the sabotage that comes from mind control or the sabotage that sort of comes from, you know, cutting you off from nature and health, you know, it was a long series of suggestions. It took us about an hour to walk through the whole thing of how you get technology in the box. So I'm a technology lover, but I wanted to serve humans and I wanted to serve human civilization. Frankly, I don't want to be a machine. I don't want brain machine interface injected into me. I don't want to live in the Borg. I don't want the machine to tell me what to think. I don't want the machine to, you know, turn off my money if they find it offensive what I say. So I have to tell you a very funny story. I was in the Union Station. I don't know if you've ever been in Washington, but Union Station is a train station, but it's a whole shopping complex. And I was having breakfast with a guy who used to be a congressman. And he'd been a congressman when I was in Washington, and we didn't like the restaurant we were in, so we decided to walk across Union Station and go to a different restaurant. And as we were walking through, we ran into one of the senators who was new. So he had come after I had left Washington. I didn't know him. Anyway, so my friend was just talking to him, and then he introduced me to the senator. And the senator was being very polite. And he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Well, Senator, I run something called the Solari Report." And he said, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "Well, I have a group of subscribers who pay me to travel around the world and do what I want, go where I want, write about what I want, interview whoever I want, and basically publish whatever I want." And I meant to be funny. And this look of grief came over his face, and he said, "Oh God, how could I get that job?" And I said, "Well, Senator, the apprenticeship is a little rough." And but what you realized was you're in a machine in those jobs, and it's a brutal machine. And if we can break free of that machine and find a way to sustain ourselves and each other outside of that machine, that's where we have to go. That's where freedom is. And part of that, of course, is taking back the governments, because you've got to deal with the government money. You've got to deal with the taxes. But each one of us is going to have to find our way of getting out of the machine, of walking away. And you can.
Yeah.
And you don't have to live in the woods and eat beans, but you do have to get technology to a place where it's serving you, as opposed to being used to harvest you and your family to serve the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Got more questions?
Yeah, I was just thinking too.
We've got to say a prayer for Bobby to come back.
I know.
He hasn't been able to get back on. I was going to
No.
say that. It doesn't look like he's able to get back on. The censorship is brutal.
I can't
It's
hear
really
you
unfortunate.
guys.
You can't hear us?
No, I can hear you guys, but I think she can't hear us because I was asking some questions too there. Catherine, can you hear?
Wow, I can't hear you.
Oh no.
Oh,
None of us? No.
Answer.
1 sec.
Got some good questions for her too.
Let's see if we
Okay,
can
right there.
try again.
We've got some good conversation going on. That's really unfortunate. Can everyone in the audience, can you hear
You
us
can
all?
hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
We can hear you.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, Catherine. Let's just give it a second here, everyone.
Okay,
It's,
somebody say something. Can you?
Yeah.
let's test.
So everybody who's watching, they said they can hear all of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we know we have some good
You can
information
hear me,
when
but I can't hear you.
It's almost like as soon as she said the name Bobby.
That's
Maybe you're gonna come
exactly
back.
what it is. That is exactly. I've been dealing with this for the last 2 weeks. So even if you watched my Instagram live today,
Yeah.
I was like
Yeah.
R.F.K.J.R.
Yes. 100%.
We're
Don't
going
worry,
to be
everybody.
patient. We knew we had a huge powerhouse tonight by bringing
did.
them in together.
Yeah.
And it's too bad Bobby couldn't finish what he was going to say, but we can all find him, go to his website, Children's Health Defense.
.org.
.org.
Yep.
And
Or even head out to the Canadian one as well, Children's Health Defense.
she's back.
If you're a parent in Ontario,
Can you hear us, Catherine?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
I can't hear you.
I can't see her or hear her.
Nope, me neither.
Oh,
No.
Wow.
But what I was going to say is, if you're a parent in Ontario, you
Well,
can
you
reach
wanna
out
give
to
me the
Children's Health
questions
Defense
by
Canada if you
chat?
are looking to join in the educational lawsuit for children in masks and what have you. You can email chdcanada@protonmail.com. And again, that is...
Okay, so where
Oh, you
are
guys.
you going to put the questions?
Can you hear us
Okay.
again, Catherine?
Can you put them in the chat box?
Yep.
So,
It's gonna be, I know you can't hear us, but it's going to be in our private chat.
Yeah.
I actually can't see her at all, you guys. You
Okay.
guys, there is something
I'm gonna
definitely
put it on
going
the
on here.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
bear with us.
Yeah, so I am just going to write Catherine. Let's see if she can check that. See if she can. There
Where'd
we
you put it?
go. So let's go, Catherine.
Yeah, let's just put the questions up
private
on the screen. How
chat.
about that? That's a good call. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the next question we're going to pop up on the screen?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just wrote, if you come to Solari and you put in the
Can you guys
in
hear
the search
Catherine?
bar American Values, I just wrote a review of his
Okay,
book.
I'm
I
not
don't know if
getting-
you've
I'm not
read it.
hearing her
It's
at all.
really excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, let's find the next question. Hold on.
And it's so interesting because
Got her.
what did Danielle just
She lost you. She lost you.
We can hear you okay, though. Hold on. Where's the, there's so many comments.
Okay, so are you guys going to give me a question?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had a question. Can you hear me, Catherine? Okay.
No, Danny, put it in the
She
chat
can't hear you at
or
all.
put it up on the screen.
We can hear her. She can't hear any of us.
I'm
Yeah.
actually my
It
typing
is,
mode is
they
actually.
keep saying in the
Oh.
chat box, see if you can call Bobby and bring him in on speakerphone. That's a great idea. That's what we do. We do a roundup twice a week, and when they mess with us, we bring somebody in by phone.
Okay, let's see.
Oh, I love that. We're going to take over the school board. That is so important because we are using our taxes to pay for schools, and then the
Mhm.
schools are busy trying to harm our kids. So you got to take back the school board.
Mm. Oh, this is.
So are you guys going to give me a question?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me, Catherine?
There we go. Let's see if we can do this one. All right, let's try this one.
Ah, great question. Can you explain why they're using COVID as a coup? Absolutely. If you want to centralize control, you think of you want to market the centralization of control, you need to persuade people to allow you to incrementally build that control. And the way you do that, one of the most effective ways of doing that is to make them afraid. And you don't want them to be afraid of you. You want them to see you as the solution. So you need an invisible enemy. So 20 years ago, the invisible enemy was terrorism. And then the invisible enemy was, I guess we had a period where it was the Russians. Now the invisible enemy is, I call it the magic virus. So if you have an invisible enemy, then the general population will be afraid of that invisible enemy and will support government in doing more controls for our safety. So it's a matter of putting a population in fear and allowing them to implement more and more and more controls. And you want to do it in a way that sort of steps the herd into the slaughterhouse. You don't just take them directly into the slaughterhouse, but you go through the process where, just lock down for a couple weeks and then it'll be over. We'll flatten the curve. And then, so it's one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing. And you want to do it in a way that you keep them in fear. Part of what's happening with the pandemic is what I call projective identification. So I'll use the United States as an example, but Canada is related. Between fiscal 1998 and 2015, we had a financial coup d'etat. The financial crisis was part of that, but from U.S. government accounts between fiscal 1998 and fiscal 2015, $21 trillion went missing. Now, $21 trillion at the end of 2015 was approximately the outstanding government debt. So think of it, we have the government issue lots of debt, and then the money disappears out the back door. So, and that's why I call it a financial coup d'etat. the coup has accelerated between 2016 and now, and literally that undocumentable adjustment is up to 96 trillion, which is significantly more than the outstanding debt. Now, that number is an accounting number, and there's lots of debate about how much cash and other assets that is. But one way or another, we've had a financial coup d'etat. We are now coming into the end game when all the retirees are starting to say, okay, well, we put our money into the system. We want our money back for nursing homes, or we want our money back for traveling. And the problem is the system doesn't want to give the money back because we've had a financial coup. So what do you do before they figure out that you've stolen their money and they want it back? You attack the victim, right? It's called projective identification in politics. And before somebody can attack you for doing something, you attack them first. And that's what a lot of the weird Orwellian media is about. You're attacking the general population before they can figure out you've stolen all their money, and they attack you back. And so this allows you to do a series of things which are extreme control mechanisms that give you the ability to sort of turtle through the situation where you've literally stolen, one or two entire generations' money. And you don't want to be held accountable for it, because in the current legal mechanisms, there are theoretically ways that we can all get those assets back. So think of it this way: you have a government, you move the resources out into a new system, and then you tell everybody, oh, there's no money, and so we have to cancel this and we have to cancel that. We can't do this and can't do that. That's why I keep telling everyone a lot of this fight is going to come back down to the taxes, because we can't continue to finance a system which is basically, it's like milking a cow and there's a hole in the bucket. You're never going to have a bucket of milk as long as you've got a hole in the bottom. But a pandemic is an unbelievably clever way to sort of consolidate the financial coup in the end game. So if you look at the financial crisis that we had in 2008, it was very clear that the population was not going to tolerate that one more time. So you needed a non-financial crisis so you could engineer the next phase of the financial crisis.
Perfect.
Does that make
Our
sense?
next question,
You have to type. I can't hear you.
The next question kind of ties into, let's see here. Okay.
So somebody just asked, what's the best way to shut that down? Gold backing of the dollar. I published a study called State of Our Currency, and I go through many of these different issues, both what the currency system has been, where it's going, and what the critical issues for all of us are. It's a big topic because a global currency involves all the money on the planet, all the industries, all the people. And I would suggest you read that if you're interested. But the important thing to know is we need to decentralize the money creation. And so if you're interested in using gold and silver, I would suggest, I'm going to tell you something that's not launched yet. It's still in the testing phase, but you guys in Canada are special, so I'm going to tell you about it. This was a tool that we created and published on the internet. We had it up many years ago, and then it got destroyed. So we've gone to sort of doing it again. If you go to the website silverandgoldourmoney.com, silverandgoldourmoney.com, you'll find a tool there that we're testing. And essentially what you can do is, in about 20 different currencies as well as Bitcoin, it helps you transact between those currencies, and it's a currency exchange calculator. And I'm always saying, we all have to create our own community currencies. And the way to do it, to start, you don't have to create an organization. You don't have to get along with each other. You don't have to use bylaws. All you have to do is take the gold and silver calculator and just start circulating your coins. So you can use silver coins, you can use gold coins, you can use your local currency coins, so you could use Canadian dollar coins or cash. Anyway, but go to silverandgoldourmoney.com and and start thinking seriously in your local area. How can you start to circulate assets, goods and services, or using coins, money outside of the system? Because we're going to have to create our own, we're going to have to take back the money creation, and we want to do it in a way that we just do it. And so the idea of the silver and gold calculator is to give you a tool. So if you want to start a community currency, you can start it by just doing it. There are two other things that are great resources on the Solari report. Now, these were written for the US, but you can easily adapt them to Canada. And one of them was adapted by a Canadian group, I think the Vaccination Board. If you come to Solari.com, you'll see the Family Financial Disclosure Form, and then you'll see disclosure forms for schools and employers. And these are forms, they were inspired by the healthcare proxy planning process. These are forms. The first one is for family members who are trying to talk somebody out of getting the injection. It forces them to do the proper due diligence and disclosure on the injection, including the financial ramifications of an adverse event, which are, for those of you who've dealt with vaccine injury, you know, vaccine injury can bankrupt and destroy a family financially. So it's very, very important, if someone in the family is going to do this, that the family needs to do the planning to protect themselves from bankruptcy, hopefully to talk them out of it. So there was a great show that Del Bigtree did on the High Wire with 3 people from the healthcare industry who had taken the vaccination and then, or the injection, and had these horrible neurological symptoms. Did any of you guys see that show with the 3 healthcare people? Nod yes if you did. No. Okay. So the first one was working in, I think it was a nursing home or a care home, and her employer required her to get the injection. And then she had the severe neurological damage where you can't stop shaking. And she'd been shaking literally since January and couldn't work. And the employer refused to file for workman's compensation for her. And her healthcare insurance wouldn't cover it. So if you read the Family Financial Disclosure Form, it walks you through all the issues of the workman's compensation, healthcare insurance, life insurance, disability insurance. Will they or will they not cover it? Because if you are disabled with an adverse event and can't work, and your healthcare insurance won't pay, you're really in a very, in a doubly serious situation. The second, the other 2 forms are for school and employers. We have employers and schools which are trying to mandate this, and they're trying to mandate it without informed consent, or so long as the emergency authorization is still in place, without the ability to mandate. You can't mandate something that's authorized under emergency authorization. So it walks you through all the different arguments to back up employers, back up schools, because they are pushing for things that they are outside of their legal rights, and you want to force them to take responsibility. If you do have somebody who takes an injection because their school or their employer mandated it, you want that employer to be responsible to make sure the health insurance works, to make sure the disability insurance works, to make sure the life insurance works, to make sure the workman compensation can get filed for. So anyway, these forms are really about identifying the true liabilities of dealing with these injections and pushing those liabilities back on the people who are mandating it. Because what they're saying is, we are going to mandate you taking this experimental injection, but we are not going to provide you with proper disclosure and informed consent, among other reasons, because the ingredients are secret. And we're not going to make sure your insurance and all your financial situation, your health insurance, your disability insurance, we're not going to make sure those things work. And so this is to get clear up front and to force the employer, the school, the family member to get completely clear about mathematically and financially what they're really doing, and to get the liabilities off of the innocent parties and onto the guilty parties. Anyway, so take a look at those resources, because I think they're very, very helpful and can help you with some very tricky politics in this situation. Okay, another question. Okay, pushing back on the government officials is a difficult challenge, and it depends on where you are and the intimacy of the connection. So at the city council, it's a lot easier than at the regional level, which is a lot easier than the national level. There are many different things you can do. One is by bringing information to them that makes it clear that the policies that they are doing are not in accordance with science. So I think information and education is very, very important. If you come to Solari, or you can pick this up on a general search, the Doctors for COVID Ethics in Europe delivered a series of letters to the medical agency in the European Union. First, where they informed them about the science and that what they were doing is contradictory to the science. And then in the second letter, they sent them a notice of liability for the fact that what they were doing was not only not in accordance with science, but was therefore really a crime against humanity. So it's setting up a liability sort of train. And then they delivered, when the European Union voted on the passports, or the first leg of the passports, they delivered, I think it was 714 notices of liability, not just by email, but also they delivered them in hard copy to each member of the parliament. So one, you can educate. Two, then you can put them on notice that they will be accountable. But then the third thing you can do, and this is where I get back to shunning. There's a wonderful story of how Ireland turned around the evictions of the farmers during the third potato famine. And that story is where the word boycott comes from, because the property manager who was trying to evict everybody his surname was Boycott. And literally what happened was the Irish got together and said, anybody who evicts a farmer under these circumstances will be shunned. You will not talk to them in the streets. You will not associate with them socially. You will completely ostracize them. And what I will tell you is that the day we start to ostracize people for doing what they're doing is the day we're going to start to make real progress. So another thing you can do with government officials who are not representing our interests is to shun them. Now, I think the most important thing you can do is everywhere you go, in Canada, in America, there are leaders trying to fight for the right thing, including in government. We need to support them. So, and we need to support them in very concrete ways. We need to support them with our prayers. We need to support them with our dollars. We need to support them with votes. And so in the political process where you are, what I would say is, if you've tried education, if you've tried the notice of liability, I would support, I would identify who your champions are, and then I would support them to the max. Because it's really those people who are going to go in and take back government who are, they're the ones we need to support. So I would say, support your champions. But anything you can do to cut off money and support to the guys who are clearly engineering the governments to work for Mr. Global and not us, we need to do. Why can they pass Quaxine to university students when we are paying for their established? I would absolutely pull the money. So I would homeschool. I would start to organize to stop funding these things. I think anybody who any university that mandates the injection, I mean, that's not a place where you can learn, right? In fact, they're setting it up to make you physically more difficult for you to learn. So I just think we need to pull out of all these places. In 1998, when I realized what was going on, I said, that's it, I'm out. I'm not talking to media any longer. I had had an experience with the New York Times in the Bush administration that persuaded me that they were a criminal enterprise. And then during the Clinton administration, I had an experience with the Washington Post that made me believe they were a criminal enterprise. And the reason I started Solari Report is not because I wanted to be in media. It was because I decided, the media is totally useless. It's totally corrupt. It's really a propaganda organ. And I need to talk directly to people. And I started a process where I was either helping journalists research and write, or I was answering people's questions on radio shows or by email. And it was the process of just answering those questions starting in 1998 that ultimately, after 10 years of answering questions, I became an investment advisor because I needed a regulatory structure to handle questions about money. Anyway, but it turned into a business, and I never looked back. And it was one of the great time savers of my life because I just said, these institutions have no integrity. I'm not going to bother with them. And it was one of the, I was lucky. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. So we have got to walk away from, stop financing the world we don't want to see, stop paying attention to the world we don't want to see, stop praying for the world that we don't want to see, and start building the world we want to see. And the beauty of this is, I'm only one person. You're only one person. We can't do everything. We're not God. Let's let God be God. But what we can do is we can do what we can do in our own life, bring friction. So Danielle was just telling a great story about, where is she? She's behind the chat, but she was just telling a great story about what her son is doing in school to say no to the mask. So, wherever you are, whatever you are, bring friction. And I just saw a great interview of C.J. Hopkins, who's one of my favorite writers on the Planet Lockdown team, was doing another interview with him in Berlin. And he said, don't worry about everything. Just bring as much friction as you can bring in your life. And one of the things that has clearly slowed the pandemic down is many, many people are pushing back and bringing friction. And the more we understand where they really want to go, which is slavery, the easier it gets to create that friction. So, but if you can take your political apparatus back locally, and it's not just working with the city councils and the mayor and the sheriff, it's also financing and building up what you want to see. So the more you're supporting the effective and competent local businesses, particularly the farms, I keep coming back to food because we're going to need the food. The more you're building up and building the world you want to see, the more political clout we're going to have. But I would say shun. And if we turned off our TVs, if we pulled out of the banks that are doing this, if we shut off the media that's doing this, if we walk away, I'll tell you another story. So I'm just going to tell stories since I can't hear you guys. When the 9/11, they announced the 9/11 Commission, they first announced that Henry Kissinger was going to be the chair of the commission. And so the 9/11 activists got very upset and started publishing all these articles about how evil Henry Kissinger was. And I said, no, stop. If you publish articles that say he's evil, they're going to say, oh, well, great, he's the perfect guy. I said, let's make him out to be a laughing stock. Let's just totally laugh at him. And we'll make him out to be the laughing stock. And they did. So they switched the tactic. They started making cartoons and doing all these funny things that made Kissinger out to be a buffoon. And sure enough, within, I think it was about 4 weeks, they pulled him and put in a new chairman who was much more acceptable to the families. So one of the things we're working on, it's the Salary Report, we call it Project Laughing Stock. Which is you not only want to shun these guys, but you want to make them out to be a joke. And because when you laugh at them, it takes their power away. So shun them and laugh at them. So somebody had a question about, do we want to bring in a universal basic income? A universal basic income is a process by which you give up your ability to produce or earn in the economy and are dependent on your enemy and the guy who wants to make you a slave. So does that sound like a good idea? So I think what we've seen in the pandemic is we've created two classes of business. Main Street businesses, which are deemed to be non-essential, and the businesses owned by the guys who, run the markets in Toronto and New York. So what we've said is, okay, the publicly traded businesses that we own are essential and the private businesses that you own are not. So we're going to shut you down. We're going to shut off your income. We're going to shut off your ability to earn and generate an income. And we're going to consolidate all those cash flows and market share into our business. And we're going to reduce you to poverty, at which point we're going to give you money that's basically a digital system that we control, and we'll give you a subsistence allowance, and you'll lose the memory and skills of how to generate and earn your own income. But we'll keep charging, we'll keep running the tax system so that we can extract and harvest all the value. And it's basically a plan. If you look at the economy, on the whole, it's basically a plan whereby new technology generates a fantastic amount of wealth, and you want to grab all that wealth centrally for you and your friends and not share it with the general population. So this is a way to reduce them to poverty and to be able to control them and extract all the wealth for yourself. So what do I think of the universal basic income? I think it's a really bad idea. Never give up your ability to produce and relate to people economically. Okay, what do you think of David? Let me move my chat box. Martin's perspective on life insurance companies' involvement in the coup. I don't know what David Martin has said about this, but I will tell you, so let's look at the global financial system. Think of the planet as a home, and the home has a mortgage and the home has insurance. And so your equity value in the home is only as good as your insurance. So the insurance industry politically is unbelievably powerful, but very quietly so. And the insurance industry has been a lot of stress in the last 2 decades, because as interest rates have come down and been engineered down, it's put a lot of pressure on the insurance companies' finances. And so the insurance companies are managing liability for, whether it's property liability or life insurance liability or health liability. So they're managing all these kinds of liabilities, but their earnings on their investment portfolio has been going down. So they're under a lot of stress. And I believe if you watch the pandemic, that many of the things going on in the pandemic have been engineered to protect the life insurance or the insurance industry. So I'll give you an example. The pandemic has been very, very profitable for the health insurance industry that was in real trouble. The general poisoning of the population and the aging of the population are both combining to produce a very expensive healthcare system, and government involvement and regulation is also generating a very expensive. So all these things are combining to produce a healthcare system which is many, many multiples expensive of what it needs to be. So the health insurance industry was in real trouble coming into the pandemic. And the pandemic has been, from everything I can tell, wonderful for the health insurance industry because they continue to get the premiums, but people have been, they've made it extremely difficult for people to use the healthcare system. And so your expenses are going down dramatically, but your revenues continue. And so profitability has been up. So I think much of the way the pandemic has been designed is to keep the existing system solvent, and that includes the insurance industries. Another one is so let me step back and talk about some of the things I was going to do if I gave a presentation. The situation we're in started in August 22nd, 2019. The G7 central bankers met in Jackson, Wyoming, and voted for something called the Going Direct Reset. And what you and I are living in is not a pandemic. We're living in the Going Direct Reset. So I strongly recommend you educate yourself on this, because it's really a fundamental re-engineering of the governance and financial system, which is a consolidation of this financial coup I'm talking about. So the central bankers decided to do the Going Direct Reset. They marched into the market in September and started to do a new round of fantastic quantitative easing. And that's part of what is setting off you're talking about extraordinary monetary inflation. Now, for several decades, we've had extraordinary monetary inflation, which has been offset by labor deflation. So by globalizing, what they did was they were able to compete labor globally, and that deflation offset the inflation of printing money and doing the kinds of things they did in the financial crisis. Now the question is, you sort of done that deflation process. Technology helps by being technically it can be very deflationary. But the question is, if you're going to do the Going Direct Reset and print tons of money, where are you going to get the deflation? And Anthony Fauci is basically a deflation and creation machine. When he says everybody goes home and has to stay at home and nobody can come out, nobody can travel, nobody can do anything, it stops the inflation dead in its tracks. And so you have the majority of the population cannot compete or use resources. So it's a way of getting tremendous deflation that helps you offset the monetary inflation. You're printing the money and you're giving it to your friends, and your friends are walking around and consolidating the market share and buying everything. So it's a kind of when you engineer that deflation, you engineer a situation where you can, you basically buy everything up relatively cheap, given the fact that you're printing the money to do it. What is the best way to transition our money that we have now? So the best way to transition money, again, and everybody's unique, so it's very hard to answer this without me knowing a lot about you personally. The best way to transition your money is, how can you invest? Can you invest? Do you have home and land sufficient to take your money out of the bank and invest in something that can produce your own energy and permanently lower your energy bill? Can you either with local farmers and local ranchers, can you take your money out and invest in what you need to provide your food? So in other words, how can you shift your money out of the financial system into your personal or your local system or your family system, so that you're much more resilient, and you're much more resilient with the people you can trust? So how can you go from having your money spread throughout institutions you can't trust and pull it back, whether locally or industry or network, to institutions that are much more trustworthy? That's what we're trying to do. And it's not just trustworthy, but provide you with the things you need. So I would much rather, if I had my child in college and I was paying them money so that they could brainwash my child to want to transgender, or brainwash my child, or inject them with poisons, what I would say is, let me take that money and instead teach my child how to build a house, how to grow food, how to make an audio, how to make a video, to get online and do their own show. And let me use that money to start an educational process where my child has the capital they need and the time they need to learn how to be a producer within the economic process for themselves, for their families, for their neighbors. And, so get out of that which is not real or that is not trustworthy and get back to what is real. So, what is real is land. What is real is food. What is real is water. What is real is precious metals. What is real are great companies. The vast majority of the money I've invested in the last 2 decades is in the Solari report, because one of the things I will tell you is if we're going to win, we need transparency. Transparency is the condition precedent to an economy that supports peace and doesn't support organized crime. And I'll tell you another story. Do we sell property? Wait, I want to get back to Axelrod. I'll tell you the Axelrod story in a second. Do you sell property? Depends on where you are. Believe it or not, in the United States, RV sales are now at an all-time high. Everybody's figured they got to vote with their feet, so they want to be able to pick up their home and drive around. It's funny. But it depends on where you are. Is your property in a jurisdiction where you have a fighting chance? Because if it's not, you're probably better off. You might not be. It depends. Again, circumstances are unique. But if you can get to a jurisdiction where you have a critical mass for freedom, you're going to be better off in a jurisdiction. I mean, if I was in New York City now, I would just get out. I mean, that's because the governance system is a governance system that will engineer genocide for political ends with you're in a very lawless jurisdiction. So, for example, I moved to Tennessee in 2000, but I decided to stay there permanently in 2006. I was watching a presentation by the Tennessee Firearms Association, which I'm a very, very vocal supporter of, and their lobbyists, it's sort of the guy who does the work with government, gave a speech and he said, our membership, they're very strong on Second Amendment in Tennessee, and that's the right to bear arms. He said, our membership is more than 50% of the regular voting population in every county in Tennessee. And I said, wow, that's political power. And believe it or not, during 2020, in the United States, the number one drop-off place for one-way trips with U-Haul, it was Tennessee. And I just interviewed John Harris, who's the president of the Tennessee Firearms Association. And I said, every real estate broker in Tennessee should kiss your feet because what has happened in Tennessee is you've had a very good state legislature that has been absolutely committed to sound financial management, which is extremely hard to do when the central banks are doing quantitative easing and monetary, are being really, they make it very hard for the local guys who can't just print money out of thin air to maintain financial responsibility. But the state legislature in Tennessee has done a very good job, not just with the budget, but with the retirement funds. And so if you look at the best states in the country in terms of pension funding, Tennessee's number one. But they've also been very strong on Second Amendment. And if you look at the places where freedom has real constituencies, they combine financial responsibility with real strength on core constitutional issues. And what you're seeing in the United States is everybody moving from places that don't have that kind of commitment to basic constitutional rights and moving to the states where they feel they have a fighting chance. I think we're up to 24 states that are pushing back against the vaccine passports. So if you're in Oregon and they're embracing vaccine passports and mandates, you're likely to get up and get to a good jurisdiction. So I would strongly recommend, if you have the power to do it, you want to be jurisdiction shopping. Now, that said, sometimes our business, our family and friends are in certain places, and so it's better to dig in and fight where you are. But there are absolute conditions that make a local society much more much more conducive to freedom. So I'll tell you one other funny story. During the swine flu epidemic, I came out very early on saying, look, this is genocide and this is a lie. We can't tolerate this. And in the United States, they were pushing very, very hard for vaccine mandates. And so finally it came to a head and Massachusetts started to mandate the injection. And I was sure this was going to kill us all. And I picked up the phone, and there's a great precious metals dealer that I work with over in Middle Tennessee named Franklin Sanders, and he's our partner on the silver and gold money, the silver and gold payment calculator. Anyway, so I called Franklin and I said, Franklin, I don't think they're going to mandate this injection in Tennessee, but if they do, I'm over here by myself. Can I bring my guns and come over and stay with you? Because if we're going to have a gunfight, I'd rather have a gunfight with you. He said, oh yeah, come on over. We're going to have a big gunfight here in Middle Tennessee. And frankly, I think one of the reasons that all got stopped is the NSA heard a lot of those phone calls, particularly throughout places like Tennessee in the South. So anyway, yeah, it matters what jurisdiction you're in, and it matters what their culture is in terms of believing in the rule of law, because we're not getting out of this without the rule of law. Yeah. What about UNDRIP? I have no idea what UNDRIP is. I'm afraid of buying land only to lose it. So, here's the thing. We are in a process where every day somebody's trying to persuade you to be afraid about something. Okay. And what you need to do is stop being afraid of all these different things. And you need to be afraid of tyranny. That's the only thing you need to be afraid of. And what you need to know is this is a fight to the death, and we may lose our lives. Every day I get up and I say, well, this could be the day. But, be afraid of living under tyranny. That's the only thing we have to fear. And this is a war, and, terrible things happen in war. People die, people get killed, but this is our time. We're called to it. And I'm afraid of slavery. That's the only thing. I'm afraid of tyranny, and I'm afraid of slavery, and I'm not afraid of all these other things. And the one thing I will say is when I settled the litigation, as I told you, I took a lot of the money and I put it out on my network to basically invest in people or invest in a business that could bring transparency, because I absolutely believe transparency is one of the most important tools we have to really bring change. And so I said, I'm going to invest in people, and I'm going to invest it in the things that we need to achieve change. And that's what I'm going to do with it, because without the rule of law, if we're going to be run by organized crime, there is no safe place to go. You can't get to safety by running away from what's happening. You have to get to safety by bringing the rule of law, and you can only bring the rule of law with other people. So that's why it's so important when we ask the question, where should we live, or do we buy land? Who's your tribe? So you have to invest and you have to build your tribe. And yes, you could lose it, but that's the danger of war. So, if you have enough resources, and many people don't, but if you have enough resources, the great pools of capital, the great wealthy families, the reason they own land in multiple jurisdictions is they know when war comes, they're going to lose some of it. So, it's not a bad idea to put together networks of families and friends where we say, and I've done this, okay, if we get bombed over here, you all come to Hickory Valley. Okay, if Hickory, that's where I live in Tennessee. If we get bombed in Hickory Valley, I'm going to come live with you over here. So I told you RV sales are up, and I think that's going to continue. I will just say one thing. My pastor used to always say, if we can face it, God can fix it. So there's no way. We are in first and foremost a spiritual war, and this has to be won spiritually. But anything that any of us can do to turn on the lights, that's what's going to make all the difference. So I don't think that, certainly I know Canada less well than the United States, but I would say the majority of Americans have not faced what is going on. And we've all, back to the Beck brothers from the Yellowstone, we've all done business with the Beck brothers. We've supported the Beck brothers. We've tolerated the Beck brothers. We've thought the Beck brothers were fashionable or cute, or we appreciated their donations at the local Rotary. We have not taken responsibility to run our countries in competent, ethical ways. And so, part of the transparency of this is facing the fact that we're all participating in the system. If you look at who's building the prison, it's not Mr. Global. We're all going into the workplace 9 to 5 and making money building the prison for them. Okay, is there a safe way to avoid paying taxes? Well, actually, I'm working on this one, and I hope to have something published this summer. There is a safe way to avoid paying taxes, but it requires lots of organization. And organization with attorneys and organizations with local political people and a lot of education. So you have to win in the court of popular opinion on this one. And what you've got to do is you've got to argue, okay, we're going to bring the law. One of my fantasies, and this will be in the paper that I'm working on, has been to work with the local legislators to create escrows that say, so let me talk United States because I don't know Canada well enough, but to say to the to take our federal tax payments and put them in a locally managed escrow that basically says the U.S. government is in violation of the constitutional laws related to financial management, the legislative laws related to financial management, and the regulations related to financial management. And we have, as citizens, have the responsibility to assert jurisdiction to ensure that this money is spent lawfully. So we're gonna escrow our money. We're gonna send you a check for the government debt. That's a whole nother issue for the military. And with respect to to all domestic expenditures, we don't need to send the money up to Washington and then have it trickle back in a very expensive, paperful way. We'll just take care of all those things here, but we'll provide you with a complete accounting to prove that the money has been spent according to the law and, again, in ethical and lawful ways. And we are doing this because we're responsible to stop you from breaking the law. So it's a process of bottom up, bringing the law to our tax dollars and the lawful management to our tax dollars. And all solutions require that. We cannot continue to pay. You cannot pay money to, whether it's a university or real estate taxes, into a education board that proceeds to teach your children, to keep them busy in a classroom, teaching them to be irrelevant in a global economy, teach them so they can't earn and generate a productive economic livelihood, and make them sick, whether it's sick with bad food or sick with, injecting poison into their veins. So, we can't pay to have our children destroyed. We can't pay to, basically have the federal government build a, don't start me on private prisons. Anyway, but the government money is being managed not just outside the law, but outside the laws of productivity. The little secret here, I'm going to tell you the little secret here. I did, I have an online book called Dylan Reed and the Aristocracy of Stock Profits. It's at Dylan Reed, DylanReedandCo.com, and you can read it. But I did all sorts of work with taking government money and putting it into databases and looking at it on a place-based basis. And what I discovered is the cost of oppression. Government money is used to centrally control, and it's used to engineer for a variety of central control purposes. But the big secret is, if we could, in theory, manage that money so that it's just optimized, the wealth potential is mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. Now, because of the resource pressure on the planet, we're going to have to change. We've been dreadful to the environment, and I would say the number one cause of that is the fiat money system. One of my great allies says the fiat money system has done more environmental damage than the worst mining companies ever dreamed of doing. But so we're going to have to change in a variety of ways. But if you look at the wealth potential of technology used wisely, it's fantastic. So there's no economic, that I know of, there's no economic reason for despair whatsoever. Every time somebody says, oh, well, the planet's dying, I said, really? Though that's funny, because the Carlyle Group and the big venture capitalists are doing everything, and the big private equity firms are doing everything they can to buy it up. So, apparently they don't think it's dying.
Awesome.
How can they take your property away if you own it? I could do a whole webinar on that one. If you pay property taxes, you're a renter, you don't own it. Well, yes and no. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any more questions?
Can we hear?
Oh, are you so smart? Love the weirding. What's the weirding? Anybody know?
Maybe the wording.
Wording.
Can you hear me, Catherine?
I don't think she can hear us still.
No.
Yeah.
So actually, I'm not that smart, but I'm very, very stubborn. And I won't give up. FEMA camps. I'm not worried about
I
the
wish you
FEMA
could
camps.
hear
I'm
us.
worried
We
about
love you,
free range
Catherine.
slavery.
Oh,
So Bitcoin, should we buy? Bitcoin is a prototype. And what you have to understand about Bitcoin is that it will continuously be pumped and dumped until they're ready to get rid of it or let it die on the vine. Because the real game is the central bank digital currencies, which is what they're working on now. And so you just have to understand that when you're dealing with Bitcoin, you're dealing with something that's a very speculative market, and the price is going to be continually volatile. And there are rules about how you, and strategies on how you trade the market. But you just have to be prepared. Anything you have in any crypto, be prepared to, in the worst case, lose 100%. And for God's sakes, if you're selling or swapping in a pump, when you sell, I want you to reserve in your local currency everything you need to pay your taxes. And and the idea that you don't have to pay taxes on your Bitcoin gains or your swap gains, you're dreaming. It's a total surveillance system. It's about as private as going out into Times Square on New Year's Eve and taking all your clothes off. Let's see. Don't stop, Catherine. We need to hear everything you have to say.
We'd be here all day.
If you're not careful, I'm going to tell my red button story for the millionth time. Okay, just in the leadership group. Who here has heard the red button story?
No, tell us.
No, you've never heard the red button story?
No.
Okay.
Tell us.
So this is the story. Never have an epiphany in the middle of a speech. So in the summer of 2000, I was giving a speech to a wonderful group of people called Spiritual Frontiers Foundation International, and they have a conference once a year on how to evolve our society spiritually. They're very intelligent, very well educated, very spiritually committed people, a wonderful group of people. And a friend of mine who's a healthcare practitioner had asked me to give a speech on how the money works on organized crime. And it later became a very famous article called Narco Dollars for Beginners. And it was meant to be a light, funny explanation of the economics of organized crime and how it relates to Wall Street and Washington. And basically how those institutions have been captured by illegal businesses. Anyway, so I'm in the middle of the speech, and we were discussing the Dark Alliance testimony in Congress. In 1998, Congress had held testimony about narcotics trafficking by the U.S. intelligence agencies into South Central Los Angeles. And this was all very well documented, and it's a pretty famous story. So during the testimony, a reporter that I was helping with research was told by a Department of Justice official spokesperson that the U.S. economy launders $500 million to $1 billion a year. I'm sorry, $500 billion to $1 trillion a year in all illegal monies. So the United States is the global leader in financial money laundering. So I said to this wonderful group of people, what would happen if we stopped being the global leader in money laundering? And they said, well, the money would leave the New York Stock Exchange and go to Hong Kong or Singapore or Zurich. And, we'd have trouble financing the government deficit, and we'd have trouble, the stock market would go down, and, it would put real financial pressure on us. And I said, okay, let's pretend there's a big red button up here on the lectern. And if you push that button, we can stop all hard narcotics trafficking in your town, your county, your state tomorrow, thus offending the people who control $500 billion to $1 trillion a year of all dirty money. Who here will push the button? And out of 100 people dedicated to evolving our society spiritually, I'll just ask the leadership, how many people would push the button? Guess with your fingers. 1. So 1 would push the button. So I said to the other 99, why would you not push the button? So imagine what you've got are the most spiritually evolved people in the country saying they want the U.S. intelligence agencies to continue to allow narcotics trafficking to come in and be sold to the children in their community. So they said, well, if we stop being the global leader in financial money laundering, if we offend those people, our taxes could go up, our government checks could stop, and our retirement, our stocks would go down, our retirement funds would go down because that money would leave the New York Stock Exchange. So what I learned that day was the problem was not that they wouldn't push the red button. The problem was they wouldn't have an honest conversation about what was happening, because obviously, there's no future in making money by liquidating your country. One of the reasons I love Bobby Kennedy is he understands if 54% of our children have chronic disease, there is no future for any of us. So you can't make money by liquidating your children. And as a society, if you look at the economics of the government money, that's what we're doing, and we've got to stop. Anyway, what I discovered that day was the problem was they wouldn't go into the invention room and talk about, okay, how do we turn the red button green? How do we make money pushing the red button? Because then we can push the red button. And it's very feasible, because if you look at what new technology in particular can do, we can make a fortune pushing, turning the red button green and pushing the button, because we can make money. You make more money as a society running things clean than dirty. You just can't centralize control. I mean, the problem the guys who are running things have now, and it's a risk management problem, if they allow meritocracy, then they might not end up in control. In fact, I suspect they won't. So it's much easier to take the technology and go. But make no mistake about it, one of the reasons they're so eager to print money and use it to buy up all the homes and buy up all the land and buy up all the real estate is the wealth potential of new technology is going to dramatically increase the value of the real estate and the resources. And so they want to control it. Okay, more questions. Yes, run things clean. Clean, it's funny. When I was litigating, I got a little apartment in a friend's house in West Philadelphia where I grew up. And there were 2 kids on the corner always dealing drugs. They're just always there dealing drugs. And so I sat down with my friend and I figured out how much money, if those kids, we figured they could do about $200,000 a year in business. And if you ran at least $100,000 of that through a local franchise restaurant, that was trading in the public market. I think at the time it was trading about 20 times earnings. You could create $2 to $4 million of market cap on that company just from those two young kids. They were maybe 12 to 14. So if you think about Mr. Global, how long is he going to have to educate and grow and build those kids to make that much money from them on a clean basis? And that's why transparency is so important, because the stock market depends on people believing there's the rule of law. But if we can bring enough transparency, then we blow the game. Because the winner right now in the global markets, if I have great financial liquidity, then I can take $1 and multiply it into $20 in the stock market, and even higher with derivatives and leverage. But I can get much higher margins on my illegal businesses than my legal businesses. So if you look at how the drug business is managed in a place, some is being done through big pharma, some is being done through narcotics, but they're optimizing total profits of the whole pie. So part of this is sort of figuring out how we get back to, you got a group of players who can get the high margins of organized crime and the high leverage of financial leverage, because they can pretend that the rule of law exists. But if we can bring the transparency and show that they're playing dirty, then they've got to choose one or the other. And the reality is financial leverage brings you more profit than the high margin of organized crime. But we've got to cut the cord between them, because the winners in the global economy are they're the Beck brothers, the ones who are using dirty tricks and combining them with financial leverage. If we can cut that cord, then they've got to pick one or the other, and the financial leverage is going to win. Now, of course, their theory is, let's use central bank digital currencies and vaccine passports to get total complete control, and then we can continue to not change. Do you think financing a UCC finance statement is the best way to take control of straw men? My concern with the kind of system you're talking about is the people who run things don't respect the law. And you need a way of going about dealing with the nuts and bolts of the taxation and financial control system that has popular support. So, I'm not a believer that that's going to get you very far, but I could be wrong, because I've really never studied it in detail. I've just never thought it was I've never known my old partners to ultimately, when the squeeze came, to respect the rule of law. The government is about to do something you would shoot them for. Let's see. What do you think about the Great Awakening that's out about Trump? So I see Trump as a member of the pro-centralization team. I voted for Trump. I gave him money in 2016, a small amount. But I've always seen him as a member of the pro-centralization team. So Trump was the person who started and built Operation Warp Speed, that spent $10 billion plus of taxpayers' money to make injections that have secret ingredients that are in the process of being mandated. And he put in charge of it a man whose claim to fame was he was a head of research at GlaxoSmithKline, is one of the leaders in the world on brain-machine interface. So I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. I mean, I far prefer Trump to Hillary Clinton, but there is no such thing as a savior on a white horse that's going to come riding in and fix this. If you look at what is happening, we have a fundamental economic model that's designed to centrally control, and where they want to go is a transhuman society with a monopoly on money creation that will turn us into slaves. Where I want to go is a human civilization where we decentralize money and wealth creation, so our team can create far more wealth than their team, because that's what we need to do. We need to create significantly more wealth, including reversing the damage on our environmental wealth. And I'm just not on board to have a great awakening with members of the pro-centralization team. I think we have to decentralize control. And anybody who helps build a system with brain-machine interface that engineers my resonating with a machine instead of with, living beings in life, I'm not. So I don't have a lot of faith in Donald Trump. I was amazed. I think Donald Trump did more, more than I ever believed was possible. Because you have to remember that the Secret Service guns turn out and they turn in. And so if you look at the whole Trump phenomena, you had a population that believed that the president had the power. The president doesn't run the United States of America. There was a great service done to the American people by Chuck Schumer at the beginning of the Trump administration. He got on Rachel Maddow's show and said, Trump's got to learn he can't buck the CIA. They got 50 ways from Sunday to get you. And what he was saying is the CIA runs the country, not the president, which since the CIA helped kill the president in 1963 has certainly been true. So, we have to understand, what is it the Bible say? Our help cometh from the Lord, not from Trump. The Great Awakening is about to say, oh, okay. See, I didn't know. I'm stupid. So I told you I wasn't that smart. So the Great Awakening, what's the Great Awakening? Can you just give me 2 sentences? What's the Great Awakening? Yeah, so I'm with you because I think this Sunday in Europe was Whitsun. Do you celebrate Whitsun in Canada? Whitsun celebrates the coming of the Holy Spirit in Acts 2. So it's you have the crucifixion, then you have the resurrection, then you have the ascension. And after ascension, you have the coming of the Holy Spirit that is in Acts 2. And what a beautiful day it was. It was just filled with the Holy Spirit. And that's exactly the consciousness. Part of this end game is, will we allow through injections in the poisoning for our soul to be killed or captured? And so the solution and the fundamental foundation of what this is about is to ensure that our soul is well and is immortal and is in right relationship. It's all about right relationship. And so, that's why I say the foundation of this is spiritual, and all solutions require a spiritual revival. So, yes, I think awakening, because the first intelligence we need is the divine intelligence. I once had a great ally in Washington, John Edward Hurley, and he was giving a speech at the Smithsonian on Southern culture. And right in the middle of the speech, a young man stood up and he said, "How is this relevant to me?" And John Edward Hurley reeled back and he said, "Young man, culture is the integration of the divine in everyday life." And later, many years later, after I was litigating with the Department of Justice, I came back to him and I said, "John Edward, you forgot to tell me that the culture can also be the integration of the demonic in everyday life." And what we're facing with the pandemic is an effort to integrate the demonic in everyday life. And that's why I say this war is everything. It's what we think, it's what we pray, it's what we intend, it's what we do, it's what we act, it's every aspect of our life. This is a whole spectrum war, and we have to choose, each one of us, one by one. We have to choose the divine or we have to choose the demonic, and we have to do it day to day in everything we do. And it's a matter, the reason we have this article on Coming Clean, it's a matter of going through every aspect of your life and as much as possible inviting in and supporting the divine and cleaning out and ejecting the demonic, because we want to stop giving them energy. Right now, if you look at how the demonic system works, we're all making it work. We're all supporting it. We're financing it. We're shopping in it. And we have the power to reverse that. I mean, if everybody tomorrow just turned off all the propaganda, I don't even call it the media, I call it the shriekometer. But if a significant portion of the population just ignored and turned off the shriekometer, I can't tell you what it would do. And the other thing I will tell you it would do is throughout, in my experience, throughout business and government, all the way to the top, you have really good people, but they are prisoners of the system. So think of the story of the crucifixion. The Romans knew it was very bad politics to crucify Jesus. They didn't want to do it. And so Pilate came up with the idea of letting the crowd vote to let one guy free. And the crowd is a metaphor for what's happening now. You have very, very good people in the boardrooms, in the civil service, in the government, and they can only do what we will support them in doing. So, if 99% of the spiritually evolved people as of 2000 would not push the red button, how do you expect? I mean, let's look at this from Trump's point of view or the president's point of view. You get elected, you walk into the Oval Office, your Secretary of the Treasury comes in and says, well, Mr. President, I need to make nice to the people who control $500 billion to $1 trillion of annual money laundering because, we need that to finance the checks. We need the central bankers to finance the checks. So your political guy says, well, the American people just spent $2 billion plus to get you elected and they all want their check, so you better make nice to the people who control the money because they all want, they want their community block development grant. They want their housing subsidy. They want their food stamps. They want their government contract and blah, blah, blah. And so if 99% of the most spiritually evolved people will not push the button, how are you supposed to push the button? Right? The only way to push the button is one neighborhood and one county at a time. That's where you can re-engineer the money. You've got to do it bottom up because it's different in different places. So that's the challenge. And so part of real change means how can we invite all the good guys who are threaded throughout the system to support us in saying, no, we're not going along with an inhuman civilization. And step one, of course, is the transparency to let them know that it's really this bad. I can't tell you how many wonderful people I know who can't believe that the top guys are really this evil. But if you persuade them that they are, they say, oh, well, if the world is this bad, I want to give up and just, sit down by the side of the road and just, I just want to die. I don't want to live in that world. And that's why the Great Awakening, as you're describing it, is so important, because this is a faith walk. We have to know that, this is an infection. It's been growing. It needs to come to the surface, and we need to deal with it. We need to deal with the Beck brothers. And, so we've got to take the governments back, and we've got to take the planet back, and it's a war. And I'm not, I would much prefer that we didn't have to, to go through this. But at the same time, I would much rather have the war come to a head than keep going sort of covertly the way it's been going for many, many decades, if not centuries, because, I want to be free. And I also want to have a soul which is immortal. And what these guys are up to has to be stopped. And so I'm not afraid of dying, but I am afraid of being a slave. So all these things they've got us afraid of because it might make us sick or die. Don't be afraid of those things. They're not anything to be afraid of, because we just, if we move out of this body, we move out. But for God's sakes, when you move out, you want to move out with your soul intact. So there's nothing here to fear. But we are going to have to deal with the Beck brothers, and they're dangerous. So we have to be very, very crafty. That's true. I'm not afraid of dying, but I am afraid of being a slave. And what's interesting is throughout the litigation, there were many, many times when I was sure that I was going to be dead within, anywhere from 10 seconds to 5 minutes. It was so bad that I knew that I wasn't going to make it. And And then a miracle happened. I mean, it was amazing. I got to the point where I started to depend on miracles. It was just like, okay, now I need the miracle because I've got maybe 5 minutes. So it's really, scripture teaches us to stand. And I didn't understand standing until I had no choice but to try it. And it really works because you're in a situation where it's absolutely hopeless. I'll never forget, I'm surrounded by 12 attorneys and they're telling me you have to do it. But scripture is telling me, no, I don't have to do it. So I said, no, I'm not going to do it. So kill me. I'm not going along. I'm not, this is wrong. I'm not doing it. It's not the law. I'm not going to do it. And what happens is when you do that, when you stand, I'm sure this has happened to many of you, particularly if you're a parent, then suddenly the whole energy shifts and suddenly a door or a window appears that wasn't there before. And so you have to create, faith is the substance of things hoped for but not seen. You have to create an option that is non-existent through your faith. It's one of the reasons I love the never-ending story, because the nothing has you convinced that it can eat up the whole universe and there's nothing you can do. And I don't want to give away what the protagonist says, but so if you haven't watched the never-ending story, I truly recommend it. Okay, next question. Oh, we cannot thank you enough for all your knowledge, and we hope you will join us again. We are so sorry for the sound problems. The sound problems are not your fault, Danielle. Let me make that clear. So we deal with tremendous amounts of sabotage on the Soleri team, and our team is great. So we have, if I could recommend 2 things from seeing the chats, I have a great article in the Soleri library called "What Percentage of My Assets Should I Hold in Precious Metals?" And that's to help you figure out the precious metals, the answers to the precious metals questions. But the other one I love is one I call Turtle Forth. And it's about working your way through in situations like this. So we know a lot about turtling through the sound problems at Soleri. And you guys did a great job. And I just have to say in closing, one, I want to thank you for the great audience. I love Canada, and you're such a strong people. But the other thing is, I just love your team. I love your energy. So I'm there for you. If there's anything I can ever do to help or come back, I think I told you there's nothing more dangerous to Mr. Global than mothers, especially really competent. I just think you're a very strong team of very powerful mothers. So anything I can do to help, I'm there. Okay. You have a great day.
We love you. We love you so much.
We love you so much, Catherine.
I know she can't hear us right now, but we're so thankful. And I know everyone here is thankful for her too, her brilliant courage. It's too bad Bobby couldn't share the rest of his input, but we're hope to get him back on in the future with less censorship. Amazing questions, amazing participation from everyone watching today, and even better questions by Catherine. So we thank everybody for jumping on today. And we just want a quick reminder to make sure to answer the polls. It is on the website, thefreedomorg.ca. Just make sure to respond. It is important that we get all of your participation, your feedback, and your voices heard. So thank you again for participating. I'm just going to hand it off to Danny, who's going to have the closing remarks from here.
Thank you again. We had such great speakers today, and this was definitely a new one for us, having to stick handle, this sort of censorship. So, everybody handled themselves really well, and Catherine, just thank you for holding it up. I will send this over to her later when we're closing off. We had some amazing speakers today. Hopefully, we can get Bobby back again as well. To the ladies behind this organization, and to all of the participants here, without you, this wouldn't work. So from the bottoms of our heart, we thank you. Please mark your calendars and join us for the 6th Freedom for Truth Conference on Friday, June 18th with Kim and Dr. David Martin, who is, of course, most well known for his epic bow tie and bringing truth to us all when he was featured in the movie The Plandemic. And you won't want to miss out on what him and his lovely wife, who is also a nurse, have to say. Again, donations are always appreciated. You can donate at thefreedomorg.ca via PayPal or the e-transfer option. We'll be sure that all donations are put towards great use in our action campaign and our Love and Light Music Festival at Vanier Park in Vancouver on July 1st for Canada Day. We cannot wait to see you there. We know we've got our lovely ladies flying out from Ontario to be here with us. Join them. Come out and just be here with them and come and just celebrate being in love and light. These conferences just keep getting better and better. So we know that we are going to win this. We will win this fight. Thank you all. Thank you for being here and have a great night and a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Love you
Have a good
guys.
night.
Love you, ladies.
Good night, everybody.